The autumn sun cast long shadows across Sunset Ridge Park as children's laughter echoed through the crisp afternoon air. 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez pumped her legs harder on the swing set, her dark curls flying behind her like silk ribbons in the breeze. Her infectious giggle made other parents smile as they watched their own children play nearby. "Higher, Mommy. Push me higher," Emma called out, her voice full of pure joy that only a child could possess. Maria Rodriguez stood behind the swing, giving her daughter gentle pushes while scrolling through emails on her phone. It was their Tuesday tradition, after school snacks and playground time before heading home to start homework. Maria had been looking forward to this moment all day, especially after the stressful morning she'd had at the insurance office, where she worked as a claims adjuster. "Be careful, Mia," Maria called out affectionately, using the Spanish endearment that always made Emma beam with pride. Not too high. The park was busier than usual for a weekday. Several mothers sat on benches chatting while keeping watchful eyes on their children. 2 teenage boys were playing basketball on the court nearby, the rhythmic bounce of the ball creating a steady soundtrack. An elderly man fed pigeons near the fountain, completely absorbed in his peaceful ritual. Emma's best friend from school, Sophie Chun, ran over from the monkey bars where she'd been showing off her latest gymnastic moves. "Emma, come play tag with me and Jake," she called out, breathless with excitement. "Can I, Mommy? Please?" Emma's brown eyes sparkled with anticipation as she dragged her feet to slow the swing. Maria smiled and nodded, feeling her phone buzz insistently in her pocket. "Stay where I can see you, okay? Don't go past the big oak tree." Emma hopped off the swing with the grace of a young dancer and ran toward the playground equipment where other children were already gathering for an impromptu game of tag. Her purple sneakers kicked up small clouds of dust as she ran, her pink jacket tied around her waist, bouncing with each step. Maria's phone continued buzzing persistently. The caller ID showed it was her supervisor, Janet, probably calling about the Henderson claim that had been giving her headaches all week. Maria hesitated, knowing that Janet rarely called after hours unless something was urgent. The insurance company had been under pressure lately, and missing an important call could mean serious consequences. She glanced at Emma, who was now climbing the jungle gym with Sophie and 3 other children, all of them laughing and shouting playfully. The playground was enclosed by a low fence, and Emma was clearly visible from where Maria stood. It would just take a minute to handle whatever crisis Janet was calling about. "Hello, Janet," Maria answered, turning slightly away from the playground to hear better over the children's noise. "Maria, thank God you answered," Janet's stressed voice crackled through the phone. "We've got a major problem with the Henderson claim. The adjuster from the other company is saying our client was at fault, and they're threatening to take this to court. I need you to pull all the photos and documentation right now and email them to me." Maria felt her heart sink. The Henderson case involved a 3-car accident with disputed fault lines, and she'd spent weeks organizing the evidence. "Janet, I'm at the park with Emma right now. Can't this wait until tomorrow morning?" "Absolutely not. Their deadline is 5 o'clock today, and if we miss it, we're looking at a potential lawsuit that could cost the company hundreds of thousands. I'm sorry, but I need those files now." Maria's eyes flicked toward the playground. Emma was still visible, now sliding down the blue spiral slide with Sophie right behind her. The game of tag seemed to have evolved into hide and seek, with children ducking behind various pieces of equipment. Okay, Maria sighed, already feeling the familiar stress headache building behind her temples. "I'll need to access my work email. Give me 5 minutes." As Janet rattled off specific document numbers and filing codes, Maria found herself walking slowly toward a bench where she could sit down and focus on pulling up the complex email system on her phone. She kept glancing up every few seconds, catching glimpses of Emma's pink jacket as she moved between the playground equipment. The phone conversation grew more intense as Janet described the legal implications of the case. Maria had to concentrate hard to navigate through multiple folders in her email system, all while trying to remember the exact names of photo files taken weeks earlier. The sun was getting lower, casting longer shadows that made it harder to distinguish between children on the playground. I found the photos from the scene, but I can't locate the witness statement from Mrs. Patterson, Maria said, squinting at her small phone screen as she scrolled through dozens of attachments. Check the supplemental folder under P for Patterson, Janet instructed impatiently. And Maria, I need the insurance adjuster's report too, the one with the damage estimates. Maria became absorbed in the urgent task, her fingers flying over her phone's keyboard as she located and forwarded multiple files. The legal deadline was looming, and she could hear the stress in Janet's voice growing with each passing minute. When she finally looked up from her phone 15 minutes later, ready to tell Janet that all the files had been successfully sent, Maria felt her blood turn to ice. The playground was still full of children laughing and playing, but she couldn't see Emma anywhere. No pink jacket, no dark curls, no familiar giggle rising above the other voices. "Emma?" she called out, her voice carrying a note of concern but not yet panic. "Emma, where are you, Mia?" Maria ended the call abruptly, not even saying goodbye to Janet, and stood up so quickly that her phone nearly slipped from her hands. She walked briskly toward the playground, her eyes scanning every corner, every hiding spot. "Emma," she called louder, her voice beginning to crack with the first edges of fear. Sophie Chun looked up from where she was hanging upside down from. "The monkey bars. Mrs. Rodriguez?" "Emma went to get a drink from the water fountain like 10 minutes ago." 10 minutes. Maria's heart began to race as she realized how long she'd been distracted by the phone call. She ran to the water fountain near the restrooms, but Emma wasn't there. She checked the bathrooms, calling Emma's name loudly enough to make other parents look in her direction with concern. That's when Maria's world began to collapse. "Emma, where are you?" The scream that tore from her throat was primal, desperate, filled with every mother's worst nightmare. She ran back to the playground, searching behind every slide, under every platform, calling her daughter's name with increasing panic. Other parents immediately understood what was happening and began helping, spreading out across the park, checking every possible hiding place. But as the minutes ticked by with no sign of Emma, the terrible truth became undeniable. Emma Rodriguez had vanished without a trace, as if she had simply been swallowed by the lengthening shadows of the Arizona afternoon. The wail of sirens cut through the afternoon air like a knife, growing louder with each passing second until they seemed to shake the very ground beneath Sunset Ridge Park. Within 8 minutes of Maria Rodriguez's frantic 911 call, the first patrol car screeched into the parking lot, followed immediately by 2 more units and an ambulance. The peaceful neighborhood playground had transformed into a crime scene, bustling with urgent activity. Officer Jake Morrison stepped out of his K-9 unit, his 6-year partnership with Rex immediately evident in the way the German Shepherd looked to him for direction. Rex was a magnificent specimen, 85 pounds of pure muscle and intelligence, with alert amber eyes that missed nothing. His black and tan coat gleamed in the late afternoon sun as he stood at attention, sensing the gravity of the situation through his handler's tense body language. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Morrison," Jake said gently to Maria, who was pacing frantically near the swing set where Emma had last been seen. "This is Rex, and he's going to help us find your daughter. Can you tell me exactly what Emma was wearing?" Maria's hands shook as she described Emma's outfit through tears. Pink t-shirt with a unicorn on it, blue jeans with patches on the knees, purple sneakers with light-up soles, and she had her pink jacket tied around her waist. She's 7 years old, about 45 pounds, dark brown hair in curls past her shoulders. Jake carefully documented every detail while Rex waited patiently beside him, occasionally tilting his head at the sound of Maria's distressed voice. The dog's training had taught him to read human emotions, and he could sense the desperation radiating from Emma's mother. "I need something with Emma's scent on it," Jake explained. "Something she's worn recently, or slept with." Maria ran to her car and returned with Emma's school backpack, which still carried the faint sense of her daughter's world, strawberry lip balm, the vanilla body wash they used at bath time, and that indefinable smell that every mother knows belongs uniquely to their child. Rex pressed his powerful nose against the backpack, inhaling deeply as his nostrils flared. Jake watched his partner's body language carefully, noting how Rex's ears perked forward and his tail straightened, signs that he had successfully locked onto Emma's scent signature. This was the moment Jake always found remarkable about working with Rex. The dog could distinguish one person's unique scent among thousands of others, like picking out a single voice in a crowded stadium. "He's got it," Jake announced to the other officers who had gathered around. "Rex, search." The German shepherd immediately put his nose to the ground and began moving with purpose, his tail wagging slightly as he followed the invisible trail that only he could detect. Emma's scent led from the swing set toward the playground equipment, confirming what other children had told police about seeing her playing there. Rex's nose worked methodically, sweeping back and forth as he traced Emma's movements through the wood chips and around the climbing structures. Detective Sarah Chun had arrived and was already interviewing witnesses, taking detailed statements from the parents and children who had been at the park. Sophie Chun, Emma's best friend, was being gently questioned by a child advocate specialist. Emma said she was thirsty, Sophie told them, her voice small and scared. "She went to get water, but then we kept playing, and I thought she came back, but maybe it was another girl in a pink shirt. I can't remember exactly." Meanwhile, Rex had led Jake to the water fountain area, his nose working frantically as he circled the concrete structure. A scent trail was strong here, indicating Emma had indeed come this way. But then something changed in Rex's behavior that made Jake's stomach drop. The dog began moving in wider circles, his tail lowering, a whine of confusion escaping his throat. "What is it, boy?" Jake asked, though he already suspected what Rex's behavior meant. Rex continued to the edge of the park's parking lot, where the asphalt met a sidewalk leading to a small strip mall. Here, the dog's behavior became increasingly agitated. He would find Emma's scent, follow it for a few feet, then lose it again. His powerful nose worked over time, checking and rechecking the same area, but the trail that had been so clear just moments before seemed to simply disappear. Jake knelt beside his partner, running his hand along Rex's back in a gesture of comfort and encouragement. "Talk to me, Rex. Where did she go?" Rex looked up at Jake with intelligent eyes that seemed to convey frustration. The dog had never failed to follow a scent trail this strong, but something was wrong. The trail ended abruptly at the edge of the parking lot, as if Emma had been lifted into the air. "Someone put her in a vehicle," Jake radioed to Detective Chun, his voice heavy with the implications. Rex lost the trail at the north side of the parking lot, near the handicapped spaces. "She didn't walk away from here." The words sent a chill through every officer on the scene. A missing child was one thing. Kids sometimes wandered off or hid in places that seemed impossible. But a child who had been taken by someone in a vehicle was an entirely different and far more dangerous situation. Detective Chun immediately called for roadblocks to be set up on all major highways leading out of Phoenix. An Amber Alert was issued, sending Emma's description to every cell phone, radio, and television screen in Arizona within minutes. FBI's Child Abduction Rapid Deployment Team was notified and would be on scene within hours. As darkness began to fall over Phoenix, the search expanded beyond the immediate area. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras swept overhead, their searchlights cutting through the gathering shadows like white fingers reaching down from the sky. Volunteers arrived by the dozens, neighbors, parents from Emma's school, complete strangers who had heard about the missing child and felt compelled to help. Rex and Jake joined teams of searchers who spread out in a grid pattern, covering residential neighborhoods, abandoned buildings, and the desert areas surrounding the city. The German shepherd's energy never flagged, even as the hours stretched on. Every few minutes, Jake would let Rex smell Emma's backpack again, refreshing the scent memory and keeping the dog focused on their mission. But as the night grew deeper and colder, and search after search turned up nothing, Jake began to feel the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Somewhere out there, a 7-year-old girl was alone and scared, possibly in the hands of someone who meant her harm. Rex sensed his partner's growing anxiety and pressed closer to Jake's leg as they walked, offering the comfort that only a loyal partner can provide. The search would continue through the night and into the next day, with teams rotating to maintain fresh eyes and energy. But as Jake looked up at the star-filled desert sky, he made a silent promise to Emma Rodriguez. Wherever she was, they would not stop looking for her. Not ever. Rex seemed to understand, letting out a single, determined bark that echoed across the empty parking lot where Emma's trail had vanished into the night. The Arizona desert at dawn was a masterpiece of gold and crimson, painted across endless miles of saguaro cacti and jagged rock formations. For 3 days, this breathtaking landscape had been the scene of the largest search operation in Phoenix's recent history. Helicopters had swept every canyon. Volunteers had combed through every wash, and search dogs had followed every possible trail. But Emma Rodriguez remained missing, seemingly swallowed by the vast wilderness that stretched beyond the city's edges. Tom Bradley had been hiking these trails for 15 years. The 42-year-old park ranger knew every hidden canyon, every seasonal water source, and every dangerous drop-off in the Camelback Mountain area. What he didn't expect to find on his early morning solo hike was the faint sound of human crying echoing off the canyon walls like a ghost's whisper. At first, Tom thought it might be the wind playing tricks through the rock formations. The desert could create haunting sounds as air moved through narrow passages and hollow spaces. But there was something distinctly human about the sound, a rhythm that spoke of genuine distress rather than natural phenomena. "Hello?" Tom called out, his voice carrying across the silent canyon. "Is someone there?" The crying stopped abruptly, replaced by a silence so complete that Tom could hear his own heartbeat. He stood perfectly still, listening intently, when a small voice drifted down from somewhere above him. "Help me, please, The voice was so weak, so fragile, that Tom felt his chest tighten with emotion. It was clearly a child, and given the massive search operation that had dominated local news for 3 days, Tom's mind immediately jumped to the missing Rodriguez girl. Following the sound, Tom began climbing carefully over loose rocks and around massive boulders, calling out encouragement as he went. "I'm coming. Keep talking to me, sweetheart. Tell me your name." "Emma," came the barely audible reply. "My name is Emma." Tom's hands were shaking as he called 911 while continuing to climb. The dispatcher's voice crackled through his satellite phone as he explained his location using coordinates he'd memorized from years of hiking in the area. "I've found Emma Rodriguez," he said breathlessly into the phone. "She's alive, but she needs immediate medical attention. I'm about 3 miles northeast of the main Camelback trailhead in Devil's Canyon." Following Emma's weak responses to his calls, Tom finally located her in a small cave formation, created by 3 large boulders leaning against each other. The space was barely large enough for a child, but it had provided crucial protection from the desert's extreme temperature swings. Emma was curled in a tight ball, her pink t-shirt now torn and dirty, her dark curls matted with dust and debris. Her lips were cracked and bleeding from dehydration. An angry red sunburn covered her exposed arms and face. But her brown eyes, though glazed with exhaustion, still held a spark of the determined spirit that had kept her alive. "Hi, sweetheart," Tom said softly, not wanting to startle her. "My name is Tom, and I'm here to help you. You're going to be okay now." Emma looked at him with a mixture of hope and wariness that broke his heart. "Are you a good person?" she whispered. "The bad man said he was good, but he wasn't." "I am good," Tom assured her, slowly removing his backpack and pulling out his water bottle. "And I'm going to get you back to your mommy and daddy. Can you tell me if you're hurt anywhere?" As Emma sipped small amounts of water, she began to tell Tom her incredible story of survival. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but her words revealed a remarkable tale of a 7-year-old's instinct and resourcefulness. "When the bad man left me here, I was so scared," Emma said, accepting small pieces of energy bar that Tom offered her. "But then I heard water dripping somewhere, and I followed the sound." Emma explained how she had discovered a tiny seasonal spring about 50 yards from her hiding place. Water that seeped through rock crevices and collected in a small natural basin. It was this water source that had kept her alive when dehydration should have claimed her within 24 hours. "And I found berries," Emma continued, pointing to a cluster of prickly pear cacti visible from their location. "The red ones tasted sweet, but the white ones made my tummy hurt, so I stopped eating those." Tom marveled at the child's intuitive understanding of desert survival. Prickly pear fruits were indeed edible and provided both nutrition and additional moisture. Many adult hikers wouldn't have known this crucial fact. The sound of helicopter rotors grew louder as emergency response teams raced toward their location. Emma's eyes grew wide with fear at the noise as she pressed herself further back into the cave. "It's okay," Tom soothed. "Those are the good people coming to help us. They're going to take you to see a doctor, and then you'll see your mommy and daddy again." When the paramedics finally reached their location, rappelling down from a hovering helicopter, they found Emma clinging to Tom's hand with surprising strength. Her vital signs were concerning: severe dehydration, mild hypothermia from the cold desert nights, and exhaustion. But she was alert and responsive. "You saved my life," Emma whispered to Tom as the paramedics prepared her for transport, just like the dog did. Tom looked puzzled. "What dog, sweetheart?" Emma's eyes began to flutter closed as the paramedic administered in 4 for dehydration. "The big dog that stayed with me the first night. He was warm, and he showed me where the water was. But when I woke up, he was gone." The paramedics exchanged glances. There had been no reports of any dogs in the search area, and certainly no domestic dogs that could survive alone in this harsh environment. But Emma seemed completely convinced of what she had experienced. As the helicopter lifted off, carrying Emma toward Phoenix Children's Hospital, Tom remained on the rocky outcropping where he had found her. He looked around the desolate canyon, trying to imagine how a 7-year-old child had survived 3 days and nights in conditions that challenged experienced desert hikers. In the distance, he could see the search teams beginning to converge on the area, their vehicles kicking up clouds of dust as they raced toward the coordinates he had provided. Soon, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez would be reunited with their daughter, and the nightmare that had gripped Phoenix for 3 days would be over. But as Tom began his own descent back toward the main trail, Emma's words about the mysterious dog echoed in his mind. In his 15 years of hiking these mountains, he had never encountered any wild animals large enough to match Emma's description. Yet something had helped guide this child to water and safety. Perhaps Tom thought as he watched the helicopter disappear over the distant mountains. Some guardian angels come in forms that cannot be easily explained. Detective Sarah Chun's eyes burned from staring at computer screens for the past 18 hours, but she couldn't stop now. Empty coffee cups littered her desk like monuments to her determination, and the fluorescent lights of the Major Crimes Division cast harsh shadows across dozens of printed surveillance photos scattered across every available surface. Somewhere in this digital haystack was the needle that would lead them to Emma Rodriguez's kidnapper. The coffee-stained whiteboard behind Sarah's desk looked like the work of a brilliant madman. A spider web of connections, timelines and theories, drawn in different colored markers. Photos of Emma smiled down from the center, surrounded by maps of Phoenix, lists of registered sex offenders, and grainy surveillance images from every business camera within a 5-mile radius of Sunset Ridge Park. Detective Chun? Officer Rodriguez, no relation to the victim's family, approached her desk with a thick folder. I've got the enhanced footage from the gas station on Camelback Road. The tech guys worked some magic on the resolution. Sarah's pulse quickened as she opened the folder. For 3 days, they'd been analyzing hundreds of hours of security footage, looking for any vehicle that appeared in multiple locations around the time of Emma's disappearance. The gas station footage had shown a white van, but the original quality was too poor to make out license plate details. The enhanced images made Sarah's breath catch in her throat. There it was, clear as day, a white Ford Transit van with Arizona plates and a distinctive dent in the rear passenger side panel. More importantly, the timestamp showed it had been at the gas station just 40 minutes after Emma's disappearance, heading away from the park area. Beautiful work, Sarah murmured, already reaching for her phone to call the DMV records department. Even at 2 a.m., she could access the database to run the license plate number. As the search ran, Sarah pulled up the timeline board she'd been constructing. The van had appeared on 3 different cameras. First at a traffic light 2 blocks from the park at 4:20 p.m., then at the gas station at 4:35 p.m., and finally at a McDonald's drive-through on the outskirts of town at 5:15 p.m. The pattern suggested someone fleeing the immediate area, but not yet reaching their final destination. Her computer chimed with the DMV results, and Sarah felt her heart rate spike. The van was registered to Marcus Allen Kellerman, 34 years old, with an address in a run-down apartment complex in South Phoenix. But what made Sarah's blood run cold was the criminal history that populated her screen when she ran his name through the system. Marcus Kellerman had been arrested twice for child endangerment, once in 2019 for inappropriate contact with a neighbor's daughter, and again in 2021 for lurking around elementary school playgrounds. Both cases had resulted in plea bargains, with minimal jail time, due to what his defense attorney had called insufficient evidence and misunderstandings. Son of a bitch, Sarah whispered, then immediately called Captain Martinez despite the early hour. This better be good, Chun. The captain's groggy voice came through the phone. It is, Cap. I've got our guy. Marcus Kellerman, 34, with a history of child-related offenses. His van matches surveillance footage from the day Emma disappeared, and he's got no solid alibi for the time frame. Sarah could hear Captain Martinez becoming fully alert on the other end of the line. What's his current status? Unknown. I'm about to send units to his address for surveillance while we get a warrant. But Captain, given his history and the fact that Emma was found in the desert, I think this bastard dumped her there to die. Within an hour, Sarah was part of a convoy of unmarked police cars heading toward Kellerman's apartment complex. The Sunset Gardens apartments were anything but gardens, a collection of 2-story buildings with peeling paint, broken windows, patched with duct tape, and the general air of a place where people went to disappear from the world. FBI agent Rebecca Torres had joined the operation, her presence indicating that the case had officially become a federal kidnapping investigation. Chun, what do we know about this guy's current employment, associates, daily routine? Sarah consulted her notes as they parked across the street from Building C. He works construction for Desert Sun Contracting, but hasn't shown up for work since Tuesday, the day after Emma went missing. His supervisor says that's typical for Kellerman. Calls in sick frequently. No known close associates. Keeps to himself. Neighbors describe him as creepy and someone who stares too much. As dawn began to break over Phoenix, the surveillance team watched Kellerman's apartment window for any signs of movement. The warrant had been approved, and Judge Williams had personally expedited the paperwork, given the severity of the charges and Kellerman's criminal history. At exactly 6 a.m., the tactical team moved in. Sarah watched through binoculars as officers positioned themselves at all exits before the lead team approached Kellerman's door. The sound of splintering wood echoed across the courtyard as they breached the apartment. Police! Search warrant! The shouts and commotion brought other residents to their windows and doorways, creating an audience for what Sarah hoped would be the arrest of Emma's kidnapper. Minutes ticked by with radio chatter crackling through her earpiece as the team cleared each room of the small apartment. Detective Chun, you need to see this, came Agent Torres's voice over the radio. Sarah's hands were shaking as she climbed the stairs to Kellerman's second-floor apartment. The smell hit her first, a combination of stale cigarettes, unwashed clothes, and something else that made her stomach turn. The apartment was sparse and dirty, with newspapers covering the windows and fast food containers scattered across every surface. But it was the closet in the bedroom that made Sarah's heart pound with rage and excitement. There, stuffed behind a pile of dirty laundry, was Emma's pink jacket, the one she'd been wearing tied around her waist when she disappeared. The fabric was torn and stained with what appeared to be desert sand and dried blood. Bag it for evidence, Sarah ordered, her voice steady despite the fury building inside her chest. Agent Torres emerged from the bathroom, holding an evidence bag containing zip ties, duct tape, and a roll of rope. Standard abduction kit, she said grimly. This guy came prepared. The search continued for another hour, yielding more damning evidence. Maps of the Camelback Mountain area with specific locations circled in red pen. A child's purple sneaker that matched the description of Emma's shoes, and most chilling of all, printed photographs of the playground at Sunset Ridge Park, taken from various angles, including close-ups of the swing set where Emma had been playing. He was stalking that location, Agent Torres observed, studying the photographs. This wasn't random. He specifically targeted that park, probably watched it for days or weeks, waiting for the right opportunity. Sarah's radio crackled to life. All units, suspect vehicle spotted northbound on Interstate 17, near the Flagstaff exit. Arizona Highway Patrol is in pursuit. The net was closing around Marcus Kellerman, but he wasn't going down without a fight. As Sarah raced toward her car to join the pursuit, she thought about Emma Rodriguez, now safe in the hospital with her family. This monster had tried to destroy an innocent child's life, had left her to die alone in the desert. But Emma had survived against all odds, and now it was time for justice. The chase was about to begin. Dr. Linda Torres watched through the one-way mirror as 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez sat at a small table, methodically coloring with crayons that her tiny hands gripped too tightly. 4 months had passed since Emma's rescue from the desert, but the trauma lived on in every careful stroke she made on the paper, every anxious glance toward the door, every nightmare that woke her screaming in the middle of the night. Emma's artwork told a story that words couldn't express. Dark scribbles dominated most of her drawings, black vans with angry red eyes for headlights, stick figures of men with disproportionately large hands reaching toward smaller figures, and endless expanses of brown and yellow that represented the desert where she'd nearly died. But there was always one element that appeared in every drawing, a large, four-legged shape colored in brown and black, always positioned between the scary figures and the small girl. The dog again, Dr. Torres murmured to Emma's mother, Maria, who sat beside her watching her daughter with eyes that never quite lost their haunted expression. She draws him in every single session. Maria Rodriguez had aged years in the past 4 months. Her once vibrant dark hair was now streaked with premature gray, and deep lines had etched themselves around her eyes from countless sleepless nights. She insists he was real, doctor. She gets upset if anyone suggests otherwise. Says his name was Guardian. Dr. Torres nodded thoughtfully. In her 15 years of treating traumatized children, she had seen how young minds could create protective figures to cope with unbearable situations. But Emma's insistence on the dog's reality was more detailed and consistent than typical trauma-induced fantasies. Emma, Dr. Torres said gently as she entered the therapy room, can you tell me about your picture today? Emma looked up with eyes that seemed too old for her 7-year-old face. It's when the bad man left me in the scary place, she said matter-of-factly, as if discussing the weather. I was crying because I was thirsty and my arms hurt from the ropes. Dr. Torres felt her chest tighten. Even after months of therapy, hearing Emma describe her ordeal so clinically was heartbreaking. The child had developed what psychologists called emotional numbing, a protective mechanism that allowed her to discuss traumatic events without feeling their full emotional impact. And who is this? Dr. Torres asked, pointing to the four-legged figure in the drawing. Emma's face immediately brightened, the first genuine smile Dr. Torres had seen from her in weeks. That's Guardian. He came when I was scared and stayed with me. He was warm and soft, and he showed me where to find water. He made me feel safe. Dr. Torres made notes as Emma continued describing her mysterious protector. The details never varied. A large dog, German Shepherd-like in appearance, with intelligent amber eyes and a gentle manner. According to Emma, Guardian had appeared on her first night in the desert, curled up beside her to keep her warm, and led her to the hidden spring that had saved her life. Emma, sweetheart, Dr. Torres said carefully, the police searched that whole area with dogs and helicopters. They didn't find any other dogs out there. Emma's expression grew stubborn, a flash of the spirited child she had been before her. Ordeal. Just because they didn't see him doesn't mean he wasn't real. Maybe he was magic. Maybe he was sent to help me. A knock at the door interrupted their session. Maria entered with District Attorney Amanda Foster, whose expression was grave as she approached Dr. Torres. Doctor, we need to discuss Emma's potential testimony in the Kellerman trial, Amanda said, her voice carefully modulated to avoid upsetting. Emma, the trial starts in 3 weeks, and we need to know if she's psychologically ready to face her abductor in court. Dr. Torres glanced at Emma, who had gone very still at the mention of the trial. The child's grip on her crayons had tightened until her knuckles were white, and her breathing had become shallow and rapid. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, Dr. Torres suggested, noting Emma's distress signals. In Dr. Torres's office, the 3 women faced an impossible dilemma. Amanda Foster spread out case files on the desk, revealing the mountain of evidence against Marcus Kellerman, his van, Emma's torn jacket found in his closet, his history of child-related crimes, and the maps of the desert area where Emma had been abandoned. The physical evidence is strong, Amanda explained, but Kellerman's defense attorney is challenging everything. He's claiming the evidence was planted, that Kellerman is being framed, without Emma's testimony identifying him. As her abductor, we risk him walking free on reasonable doubt. Maria's hands shook as she processed this information. You're asking me to put my baby through hell again, to face the monster who tried to kill her. I understand how impossible this must seem, Amanda said gently. But if Kellerman is acquitted, he'll be free to hurt other children. Emma might be the only one who can prevent that. Dr. Torres reviewed her notes from months of sessions. Emma has made progress, but she's still extremely fragile. Panic attacks, nightmares, selective mutism. When stressed, putting her on a witness stand in the same room as Kellerman could undo months of healing. What if we used special accommodations? Amanda suggested. Closed courtroom, video testimony, therapy dog present for emotional support? At the mention of a therapy dog, Dr. Torres looked up sharply. Actually, that might be exactly what Emma needs. She's consistently drawn comfort from her memories of the dog in the desert. A real therapy dog might help bridge that gap between her trauma and her healing. Maria was crying now, torn between protecting her daughter and seeking justice. What kind of mother am I if I force her to relive this nightmare? But what kind of mother am I if I let that monster go free to hurt another child? Emma's voice from the doorway startled them all. The little girl stood there, having slipped away from the playroom where they'd left her. Her face was set with a determination that reminded them all that beneath the trauma was a remarkably brave child. I heard you talking about the bad man, Emma said, her voice small but steady. If I tell the judge what he did to me, will they put him in jail forever? Amanda knelt down to Emma's eye level. If you testify, and the jury believes you, yes, he would go to prison for a very long time. Emma was quiet for a long moment, processing this information with the gravity of someone much older. Will Guardian be there with me? She asked finally. Dr. Torres and Amanda exchanged glances. Emma, honey, Guardian I send single quotes T. I know he's not there now, Emma interrupted, showing wisdom beyond her years. But maybe maybe if there was another dog like him, someone who could help me be brave? And in that moment, Dr. Torres realized what Emma needed wasn't just therapy or legal protection. She needed to feel that same sense of safety and courage that her mysterious desert guardian had provided. Yes, Emma, Dr. Torres said firmly. We'll make sure you have a guardian with you in that courtroom. The trial would test them all, but they would face it together. The morning sun cast long shadows across the courthouse steps as news vans lined Central Avenue like modern-day war. Machines, their satellite dishes reaching toward the sky like metallic flowers seeking light. For weeks, the trial of Marcus Kellerman had dominated Phoenix headlines, but today was different. Today, 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez would face the monster who had tried to destroy her life. District Attorney Amanda Foster stood at the prosecutor's table, arranging her files with the precision of a surgeon, preparing for a life-saving operation. The evidence was overwhelming. DNA, surveillance footage, Emma's torn jacket found in Kellerman's closet, and the detailed maps of the desert where she'd been abandoned. But criminal defense attorney Robert Hayes was brilliant, ruthless, and desperate to save his client from a life sentence. Your Honor, Hayes had argued during pretrial motions, forcing a traumatized 7-year-old to testify against my client is not only cruel, but legally questionable. Children of this age are highly susceptible to suggestion, false memories, and coaching by authority figures who want desperately to close this case. Judge Patricia Williams, a veteran of 23 years on the bench, had wrestled with this decision for days. She understood the legal precedents, the psychological research, and the delicate balance between protecting a child and ensuring justice. Her chambers had become a battleground of legal briefs, expert testimony, and heated arguments from both sides. The courtroom itself had been transformed for Emma's testimony. The gallery was cleared of all spectators except immediate family members, court personnel, and a carefully selected pool of reporters. The harsh fluorescent lights had been dimmed, and a small table with child-sized chairs replaced the intimidating witness stand. Dr. Linda Torres sat nearby, ready to intervene if Emma became overwhelmed. Marcus Kellerman sat at the defense table, his appearance carefully managed by his attorney. Gone was the disheveled, angry man who had been arrested 5 months earlier. Today he wore a conservative suit, his hair neatly trimmed, his expression carefully neutral. But his pale blue eyes held a coldness that made everyone in the courtroom uncomfortable. Maria Rodriguez clutched her husband Carlos's hand so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. They sat in the front row, close enough to offer Emma support, but positioned so she wouldn't have to see Kellerman unless she chose to look in his direction. "All rise," the bailiff announced as Judge Williams entered the courtroom. The Honorable Patricia Williams presiding. Amanda Foster had spent hours preparing Emma for this moment. But nothing could truly ready a 7-year-old for the intimidating formality of a criminal trial. When Emma entered the courtroom, holding Dr. Torres's hand, she looked impossibly small in her navy blue dress and white cardigan that her grandmother had bought specially for today. "Good morning, Emma," Judge Williams said in the gentlest voice she could manage. "Do you understand why you're here today?" Emma nodded solemnly. "To tell the truth about the bad man who took me." "That's exactly right." "And do you promise to tell the truth?" "Yes, ma'am. My mommy and daddy taught me that lying is wrong." Amanda Foster approached the small table where Emma sat, her voice warm and encouraging. "Emma, I know this is scary, but you're very brave. Can you tell us what happened on September 15th when you were at the playground?" Emma's voice was barely above a whisper as she began recounting that terrible afternoon. She described playing on the swings, going to get water from the fountain, and how a man had approached her. "He said his puppy was lost," Emma said, her hands fidgeting with the hem of her dress. "He said if I helped him look, he would give me ice cream. But I wasn't supposed to go with strangers." "What happened next?" Amanda asked gently. Emma's breathing became more rapid as she continued. "He grabbed my arm really hard and put his hand over my mouth. It tasted yucky, like cigarettes. He dragged me to his van and put tape on my hands and feet." The courtroom was dead silent except for the soft whir of the ventilation system and the occasional rustle of papers. Even the court reporter seemed to be typing more quietly, as if afraid to disturb the child's testimony. "Emma," Amanda said carefully, "do you see the man who took you in this courtroom today?" This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Emma's eyes slowly scanned the courtroom, passing over the judge, the jury, the attorneys, until they landed on Marcus Kellerman. For a brief moment, her composure cracked, and she pressed herself back in her chair. "He's right there," she said, pointing with a trembling finger at the defense table. "That's the bad man." Robert Hayes rose for his cross-examination, his manner deliberately gentle but probing. "Emma, that was a very scary time for you, wasn't it? Sometimes when we're scared, our memory can play tricks on us." "Objection," Amanda called out. "Leading." "The witness." "Sustained," Judge Williams ruled. Hayes continued carefully. "Emma, you said you were in the desert for 3 days. That's a long time. Did you see anyone else while you were there? Any other people or animals?" Emma's entire demeanor changed at this question. The fear and anxiety that had marked her testimony suddenly gave way to something that looked almost like peace. "Guardian was there," she said with absolute conviction. "He kept me safe." "Guardian?" Hayes asked, seizing on what he hoped was evidence of confusion or hallucination. "Who is Guardian, Emma?" "The dog who helped me. He was big and beautiful, with golden eyes. He stayed with me when I was cold and scared, and he showed me where to find water." Hayes exchanged a meaningful glance with the jury. "Emma, the police searched that entire area with helicopters and search dogs. They didn't find any other dogs. Are you sure this guardian was real? Emma's voice grew stronger, more confident. Just because grown-ups didn't see him doesn't mean he wasn't there. He was real to me, and he helped me survive. Dr. Torres watched Emma carefully, noting how discussing guardians seemed to calm and strengthen the child rather than distress her. This wasn't the behavior of someone discussing a hallucination or false memory. This was a child finding courage in a source of comfort and protection. As Emma's testimony continued, describing the terrifying van ride and her abandonment in the desert, the jury watched with growing outrage. But it was her unwavering certainty about Guardian, her mysterious protector, that seemed to give her the strength to face her attacker and tell her story. The courtroom had become a battleground between innocence and evil, between a child's truth and a predator's lies. And sitting at the center of it all was 7-year-old Emma Rodriguez, proving that sometimes the smallest voices carry the greatest power. The afternoon session had taken a devastating turn for Emma Rodriguez. What had started as brave, clear testimony had deteriorated into something that broke the hearts of everyone watching. Defense attorney Robert Hayes, despite his gentle demeanor, had methodically chipped away at Emma's composure with his cross-examination. And now the 7-year-old sat trembling at the small table, tears streaming down her face. Emma, Hayes continued in his measured tone, "You've told us about this guardian dog, but isn't it possible that you dreamed about him? When people are very scared and hurt, sometimes they imagine things that make them feel better." Emma's voice had become so quiet that the court reporter had to lean forward to catch her words. "He was real," she whispered, but doubt had crept into her voice for the first time. The relentless questioning was doing exactly what Hayes intended, making her question her own memories, her own truth. Dr. Linda Torres watched from her seat, noting the classic signs of re-traumatization. Emma was shutting down, retreating into herself the way she had during those first weeks after her rescue. Her small hands were clenched so tightly in her lap that her fingernails were leaving marks on her palms. "Your Honor," Amanda Foster said. Rising from her chair, the witness is clearly distressed. "I request a brief recess." Judge Williams was about to grant the request when Emma spoke again, her voice barely audible. "I gone single quotes T. I don't remember anymore. Maybe I made it up. Maybe Guardian wasn't real." A collective intake of breath swept through the courtroom. Marcus Kellerman's lips curved into the slightest smile, the first emotion he'd shown throughout the trial. Hayes nodded with satisfaction, knowing he had successfully planted reasonable doubt, not just in the jury's minds, but in the mind of his accuser. Maria Rodriguez half rose from her seat, her maternal instincts screaming at her to rush to her daughter's aid, but Carlos gently pulled her back down. They had been warned that any interference during testimony could result in a mistrial. "Emma," Hayes pressed, sensing victory, "if you're not sure about Guardian, how can we be sure about anything else you've told us? Memory is a tricky thing, especially for children who have been through trauma." That's when Officer Jake Morrison appeared in the courtroom doorway, Rex at his side. They had been scheduled to testify about the search efforts, but their timing couldn't have been more perfect or more dramatic. The moment Emma saw Rex, something extraordinary happened. A defeated, questioning child who had been crumbling under cross-examination suddenly sat up straighter, her eyes widening with what could only be described as recognition and wonder. Rex, trained to read human emotions and respond to distress, immediately sensed Emma's state. The German shepherd's ears perked forward, and he looked directly at the small girl with those intelligent amber eyes that had helped save countless lives during his years of service. Emma stopped speaking mid-sentence, her mouth forming a perfect O of surprise. Her trembling hands rose to point directly at Rex, and in the absolute silence of the courtroom, she whispered two words that would echo through legal history: my guardian. The courtroom erupted. Reporters frantically scribbled notes. The jury leaned forward in their seats, and Hayes's face went pale as he realized what was happening. Emma's voice grew stronger, more confident with each word. "That's him. That's Guardian," Emma said, her fear melting away as she looked at Rex. "He looks exactly like the dog who saved me in the desert." Judge Williams banged her gavel for order, but Emma continued speaking, her voice now clear and strong. "He has the same golden eyes, the same black and brown fur, the same gentle face. Guardian was real. He was just like this beautiful dog." Officer Morrison stood frozen in the doorway, Rex beside him, both uncertain whether to enter or retreat. But Rex seemed to understand instinctively what was happening. The trained police dog, who had spent countless hours searching for this very child, took a step forward as if drawn by an invisible force. Dr. Torres watched in amazement as Emma's entire demeanor transformed. The traumatized, doubting child had vanished, replaced by the confident, brave girl who had survived 3 days in the desert. Emma's belief in her guardian had been restored, and with it, her faith in her own memories and experiences. "Your Honor," Amanda Foster said, seizing the moment, "I believe Emma has just provided the most compelling evidence of her credibility that this court could witness. Her immediate recognition of Officer Morrison's partner demonstrates her ability to accurately observe and remember details, even under extreme stress." Hayes frantically objected. "This is highly irregular. The witness is clearly confused, mistaking one dog for another. This proves nothing except that all large dogs look similar to a traumatized child." But Emma was no longer listening to the lawyers. She had eyes only for Rex, and her voice carried across the courtroom with startling clarity. "Guardian kept me warm when I was cold and scared. He led me to water when I was dying of thirst. He stayed with me so I wouldn't be alone. And now he's here again, just when I needed him most." Rex, responding to the child's obvious distress and recognition, let out a soft whine and looked to Officer Morrison for permission. When Jake nodded slightly, Rex walked slowly across the courtroom toward Emma, his movements careful and deliberate. The German Shepherd stopped just a few feet from Emma's table, sitting in perfect form as he'd been trained, but his eyes never left the little girl who had survived against all odds. Emma reached out tentatively, and when Rex allowed her to touch his head, the connection was immediate and profound. "He remembers me too," Emma said with absolute conviction. "I can see it in his eyes." While Rex couldn't possibly have been in the desert with Emma during those 3 days, something magical was happening in that courtroom. Whether Emma had encountered another dog, or whether Guardian had been a protective vision created by her traumatized mind, Rex had become the living embodiment of her survival, her hope, and her healing. The jury watched in stunned silence as Emma found her voice again, stronger than ever. "A bad man tried to hurt me, tried to leave me to die," she said, looking directly at Marcus Kellerman for the first time since her breakdown. "But Guardian protected me then, and he's protecting me now. I'm not afraid anymore." Kellerman's cold mask finally slipped, his face contorting with rage as he realized his victim had found an unshakable source of strength. Hayes knew his defense had just crumbled before his eyes. Emma Rodriguez had found her guardian again, and this time, the whole world was watching. 10 days after Emma's stunning courtroom revelation, the jury filed back into the courtroom, with the weight of their decision etched into every face. For 48 hours, they had deliberated the fate of Marcus Kellerman, but Emma's transformation in the presence of Rex had fundamentally shifted the entire case. What had once been a question of a traumatized child's reliability had become an undeniable testament to her inner strength and truthfulness. Emma sat between her parents in the gallery, no longer the broken child who had first entered this courtroom weeks ago. Her hand rested gently on Rex's head, Judge Williams had made the unprecedented decision to allow the police dog to remain as Emma's emotional support throughout the remainder of the trial. Officer Morrison sat nearby, amazed at the bond that had formed between his partner and the brave little girl. The jury foreman, a grandfather of 3, stood with hands that trembled slightly as he held the verdict. Your Honor, we the jury have reached a unanimous decision. On the charge of kidnapping in the first degree, we find the defendant, Marcus Allen Kellerman, guilty. On the charge of child endangerment, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of attempted murder, we find the defendant guilty. The courtroom erupted as Maria Rodriguez collapsed into her husband's arms. Years of anguish and fear finally released in tears of relief and justice. Emma looked up at her parents with wise eyes that had seen too much, but had somehow retained their innocence. Marcus Kellerman showed no emotion as the guilty verdicts were read, but his defense attorney slumped in his chair, knowing that his client would likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. The mountain of physical evidence, combined with Emma's unshakable testimony after her recognition of Rex, had created an airtight case that even the most skilled defense couldn't overcome. Judge Williams scheduled sentencing for the following month, but everyone knew that Kellerman's fate was sealed. Arizona's sentencing guidelines for crimes against children, especially with his prior convictions, would result in a life sentence without the possibility of parole. 6 months later, the summer sun blazed over Phoenix as Emma Rodriguez ran through Sunset Ridge Park with a freedom and joy that had seemed impossible during those dark months following her ordeal. But she wasn't alone. Rex bounded beside her, his powerful frame easily keeping pace with the 8-year-old, who had become his unofficial partner in a different kind of police work. Officer Morrison watched from a bench nearby, a smile creasing his weather-beaten face. The Phoenix Police Department had created an unprecedented arrangement. Rex would continue his regular duties with Morrison, but twice a week he would visit Emma as part of her ongoing therapy and healing process. Dr. Torres had documented remarkable progress in Emma's recovery since Rex became a regular part of her life. She's a different child, Dr. Torres had told Morrison during one of their coordination meetings. Rex represents safety, protection, and survival to her. Through him, she's learned to trust again, to feel secure in the world. It's one of the most remarkable recoveries I've witnessed in my career. Emma's parents had initially been hesitant about the arrangement. The idea of their daughter becoming attached to a police dog seemed unusual, even potentially problematic. But as they watched their daughter's nightmares fade and her laughter return, Maria and Carlos Rodriguez became some of Rex's biggest supporters. Emma, Maria called from the playground where she sat with a group of other mothers. 5 more minutes, then we need to head home for dinner. Emma ran over to Rex, who had stopped to drink from the water fountain, the same fountain where her nightmare had begun almost a year ago. But now, instead of fear, this place held new memories of healing and hope. Rex, Emma said seriously, kneeling down to look into his amber eyes, do you think Guardian is proud of us? Rex tilted his head in that way that dogs do when they're listening intently, and Emma took it as agreement. In her mind, Rex and Guardian had become connected, 2 protectors who had appeared in her life exactly when she needed them most. Officer Morrison approached, clipping Rex's leash back onto his collar. Time to go, partner. We've got 1 more patrol to finish before end of shift. Emma hugged Rex tightly around his neck, breathing in his familiar scent of leather and courage. Thank you for being my guardian, she whispered into his fur. Thank you for helping me be brave. As Morrison and Rex walked toward their patrol car, Emma ran back to her mother, her dark curls bouncing in the sunlight. The playground was full of children laughing and playing, just as it had been on that terrible September afternoon. But Emma was no longer the same frightened child who had disappeared from this place. Mommy, Emma said, slipping her hand into Maria's. "I want to be a police officer when I grow up. I want to help kids like Rex helped me." Maria's eyes filled with tears, but they were tears of pride and hope rather than fear and sorrow. Her daughter had not only survived a monster's attempt to destroy her, she had found a way to transform her trauma into purpose, her fear into strength. Marcus Kellerman had been sentenced to life in prison without parole, but his attempt to break Emma Rodriguez had failed completely. Instead of destroying a child's spirit, his evil had revealed an unbreakable core of courage and resilience that would inspire everyone who knew her story. As the Rodriguez family walked toward their car, Emma turned back once to wave at the patrol vehicle where Rex sat looking out the window. In the distance, the Arizona mountains rose majestically against the evening sky, their peaks catching the last golden rays of sunlight. Somewhere out there, in those same mountains where Emma had nearly died, her story of survival continued to echo. Park rangers reported that hikers occasionally claimed to see a large dog wandering the trails, always appearing when someone was lost or in trouble, always leading them to safety before vanishing again. Whether Guardian was real or symbolic, whether he was Rex or something more mystical, no longer mattered. What mattered was that a 7-year-old girl had found the strength to face down evil, speak her truth, and reclaim her life. Emma Rodriguez had learned that sometimes, when the world seems darkest and most frightening, guardians appear in the most unexpected forms. And sometimes, if you're very lucky and very brave, they stay with you forever. As their car pulled away from Sunset Ridge Park, Emma pressed her face to the window and whispered, "Thank you, Guardian. Thank you for everything." In the distance, Rex barked once, a sound that carried across the evening air like a promise that protection and hope would always be there for those who needed it most.